our generation was definitely, the millennials were the first ones where we're like, man, this is kind of effed up. Like, what are we doing here? And, and then I was, just starting a career and moving up and doing well when, the Great Recession happened. And I graduated in 2004 when it was kind of down. And then it's like, oh, boom, boom, boom. And then it's like the ladder gets pulled out from underneath you. And I think, though, that we still kind of had our parents' advice of like, you keep your head down and you work hard and great things will happen to you. And we were like afraid to rock the boat. And then Gen Z has shown up and they're just like, burn it to the ground. Just they don't care. They'll leave. They'll quit. They'll find somebody. And honestly, it's become it's encouraged millennials, I think, to find our voices, because now we're the guy like during the fight, like, yeah, that's right. Hold me back. Hold me. Like all of a sudden we're joining in this fight with them now that they've kind of helped us find our voice.
Welcome to another episode of the Leading to Fulfillment podcast, where everything we talk about is meant to encourage people-first leaders, empower individuals to achieve fulfillment, and to help your organization become places people love to work. I'm your host, James Laws, and I have a great show in store for you. My guest this episode is Nathan Stuck. Nathan is an award-winning leader in the B Corp community. In addition to his role as the Director of Corporate Culture and Strategic Impact at Ad Victoriam Solution, a certified B Corp, he also founded and runs B Local Georgia, a nonprofit dedicated to growing the number of purpose-driven businesses in the Peach State. Nathan also teaches an experimental MBA course on B Corps at the University of Georgia and is the CEO of Profitable Purpose Consulting, which helps for-profit businesses certify as B Corps. In my conversation with Nathan, we discuss what a B Corp actually is and the differences with what some might call conscientious corporations, the growing trend towards meaningful businesses, what kind of businesses can become a B Corp and the impact that can have on your internal team, and evaluating what your company values with the B Impact Assessment. If you enjoyed this or past episodes, I want to invite you to subscribe to the Leading to Fulfillment podcast in your favorite podcast tool. We're on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or you can even watch us on YouTube. Now, let's jump into my conversation with Nathan Stuck. Nathan, thank you so much for agreeing to be on the Leading to Fulfillment podcast.
Thanks, James. Excited to be here. And just always excited to talk B Corps, talk purpose, and talk leadership.
And I think that's a great place for us to get started. I, of course, like you, extremely passionate and believe that businesses can have purpose beyond profit. I think businesses can aim and aspire to do more beyond that. I mean, obviously, profit is important, and in a business to succeed, it has to be profitable. But there's more to the story. There's more to the game. There's more to life than just profit. But you went through a period of time where you basically discovered your purpose. Tell me a little bit about how you got into what is B Corps and this idea of purposeful business.
Yeah, I'll do the abbreviated version, but yeah, long story short, and don't worry, I'll get there. I graduated from, if you can't tell, from the University of Georgia in 2004, and I moved home. I followed a girl back to Athens who was still in undergrad and took any job I could find in Athens. So I was dispatching chicken trucks. Did that for about a year and a half, and what am I doing right now? And it had nothing to do with, the company was actually really cool, mom and pop outfit. They took good care of us, but this isn't what I wanted to do. So I moved to Las Vegas in 2006. I played poker for a while. I literally ref hockey at night, take the money I made at the rink, go down, buy into some, midnight tournament for $80 with, 20 tables of players, and sit down and grind till 4 or 5 in the morning, hoping to, make enough to go pay some bills the next day. And I did that just long enough to miss real paychecks. And then I got a job with Enterprise. And again, great company. I learned a ton. And I think that's one thing I like to remind listeners and anybody that'll listen to me is, even though I didn't necessarily love renting cars, I don't think there's anything world changing about putting somebody in a 2006 Dodge Stratus. But that company has gotten to where they got because they're so good at KPIs. They're so good at both measuring and then managing what matters to the business. And I've taken that with me, which is where I really, when I got to this job, I was really able to add value from the beginning, which then allowed me kind of some freedom to craft my own role. But yeah, I did that for 2 years. I got promoted into outside sales. I did that for 3 years. Again, wasn't really necessarily passionate about fleet management solutions, but I learned how to sell. I learned how to sell to C-suite executives. I learned a ton about your meeting with construction, security, ATM, slot routes, like all these different companies that I'm meeting with this and learning, like, how do they make money? You know, you're getting into that. And then I moved back here, and then all of a sudden I'd worked for 2 companies in the first 8 years. And then I went through an 18-month patch where I worked for 4 companies and just started to really fizzle, burn out on capitalism, just seeing some really unethical stuff, shady stuff, legal stuff, but just, how do we feel good about this? And I quit a job through an email. That's how bad it had gotten. And moved back to Athens, decided to get an MBA. And that's the year that I didn't realize it at the time, but all of a sudden I was Athens' first Uber driver. That's true. That's a statement of fact. And then I had a roommate at the time who was a chef at the convention center. So he was like, dude, just come down, fill out some paperwork. We'll get you setup shifts. We'll get you bartending, whatever. Just whenever you're not working, if you want work, we have work. So I had never worked for $8 an hour before. And honestly, I mean, even in high school, I reffed hockey. I made, $100 a night reffing 3 hockey games. I was kind of spoiled. And all of a sudden I'm meeting, my coworkers, and you're sitting down, taking a break with them, and you start to realize, this guy or this woman works 3 of these 20 hours a week, no benefits, $8 an hour. And I'm like doing the math in my head, and I'm like, I don't care if it's 60 hours at $8. It's not a lot of money trying to raise kids. There's no upward mobility. There's no real chance to bootstrap themselves out of this situation. And I'm looking at this, how much money people are paying for these events. And it just really, like, it didn't sit well with me that this is what capitalism has gotten to. It's like ensuring the margin, all these things. And yes, you touched on it. I wholeheartedly agree. You have to make money, no profit, no purpose, but there had to be a better way. It didn't help. I was also reading Thomas Piketty, Capital in the 21st Century at the time. So I'm kind of going down a spiral here. And then I started the MBA program in my second semester, that first week of the second semester. Here comes my now CEO in for some student project looking for help to get something called B Corp certified. And we're like, I don't know what that is, but I went to that meeting, fell in love with my boss and his wife, and just awesome people. And the more I learned about B Corp, the more I was like, this is capitalism. This is capitalism that works for everybody. And I still use, the capitalism word. It is the free market movement of goods and services, and you get paid for the value you bring to the marketplace. All the traditional tenets of capitalism, just minus the Milton Friedman profit over everything mantra. So that was the start of it.
You've thrown a lot of terms around as you're walking through your journey of finding purposeful capitalism, if you will. And you talk about a B Corp. Here's this person who comes into your class, and they're doing this project, trying to get certified as a B Corp. For those listening who may not be aware, because honestly, it's still a relatively new idea, what exactly is a B Corp, as in comparison to any other business that you may come in contact with?
Yeah, that's a great question. And living in this world, I'm very good at answering it. B Corps, I call it the gold standard of corporate social responsibility. It is the only third-party certification that you can get, kind of like a LEED to a building or certified organic to milk, fair trade to coffee. It's the only outside body with an outside governing body. So there's a nonprofit called B Lab that oversees the standards, the certification process, the actual assessment that you go through, the audit process, all of the verification. So it really has nothing to do with any sort of legal structure as far as how you're incorporated. There are some caveats to it. So I think 39 states now have passed public benefit corporation legislation. So you can now incorporate your business instead of an LLC or an S Corp, or you can incorporate as a public benefit corporation. There's some requirements you have to, depending on the state. The Southeast, right, we're getting it, but we're more getting our foot in the door. I wouldn't say we're not on the Delaware public benefit corporate where you really better be proving that you're serving a public benefit.
Right.
So, and then the legal requirement, the last step of kind of the certification after you go through the assessment, and there's a workers section, there's a community section, there's a environmental section, there's a corporate governance section, and then there's a customer section, and just kind of, like, hey, a lot of, I mean, we went through this as we were initially when I was a student, and then going to work for them full time. A lot of things that we thought we valued and that we prioritized, we started to crunch numbers and realize maybe we didn't. As you know, we weren't really walking the walk. We were just kind of talking the talk. So you get through the whole process, and then you basically pay there's like an annual fee to kind of support the organization that is, creating marketing content and kind of building I would say that they're behind the scenes building some of the ROI that you realize through B Corp by raising awareness, by marketing, by talking about it. And then depending on how you're incorporated, you might have to LLCs, you just amend your articles of incorporation, and then S Corp or C Corp, you actually have to reincorporate as a public benefit corporation.
So that's very interesting. So, I'll look at my business. We have 4 core values that guide what we do, and none of those are about making profit. In fact, our ultimate first core value is people first. And we define that as our team, our customers, and then finally, the rest of the stakeholders included in that. So we have a clear kind of definition of when push comes and we're evaluating, we start with our team and our team taken care of. Are they healthy? Are they fulfilled? Are they focused? Do they have the resources they need? Then we look at our customer and so on down the line. How is I know there's a third party organization, but what is the main difference between being a corporation that cares? Say, I'd like to say you hinted at it a little bit, right? Like, you thought you valued certain things, and then when you crunch the numbers, they didn't quite add up. But to a company like us, who we give regularly every year to important causes throughout the year that are important to us, that we butt up against, and we believe in putting people first, specifically looking at our team as our primary, as our customer, as a company to try to take care of. What is different between being, I know there's a term and even a group or organization called conscientious capitalism versus a B Corp. What is other than a third party organization, what is the big difference between those two?
Honestly, not a whole lot between really good companies and just certified B Corps. What I will throw in there now, though, is the biggest return, whatever we want to call it. I like speaking in business terms, and I think most people still run their business based on business terms. But the return for most companies, and even for us, because we're over 150 employees, we're probably going to be 200 by the end of June. So it's everybody's doing this now, or at least everybody's claiming to do this. Everybody has an environmental statement. Everybody has a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Everybody talks about, or people are our biggest priority. And it becomes hard as either somebody looking for work or somebody looking for a supplier or a service provider or whatever, or just my bag of chips or my eggs. Like, it becomes harder and harder to know who's just talking a really good game. I mean, Keurig just spent a bunch of money last year to talk about their K-Cups are now recyclable. And you're like, everybody knows they're still not really recyclable. Like, they're still going to fall through the filter on the line because they're too small. So I think that's the biggest thing is everybody's greenwashing now. And this is a good way for us. And that's a lot of my job, is the storytelling around our impact and our culture. And so it's an easily bundled brand tool that it's like, okay, B Corp, got it. Breaking through kind of where everybody's about doing good now. And then you start digging and you're like, I mean, watch the Super Bowl. And I was like, man, I'd love to see some of these. Every commercial looked really diverse. I'm like, I'd love to see their actual annual impact report. I'd love to see their employee demographics. Or are they just putting, lipstick on a pig? Or are they really a good company that values this? Those are the things where I think we've all become kind of skeptical.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think about, I wonder, this is the cynical side, the old man side of me. As I look at it, I wonder, Do you find this is something that is important to a coming generation more than a generation that is on their way out? As Generation X, I find myself, I'm close to millennial, but not quite close enough. And I find myself on the what feels like on the line of people who care about this stuff. And there's a generation that came before me that doesn't give a lick about whether or not their businesses are doing good or giving towards good things. And then there's this generation that's coming behind me that cares deeply about what the places they do business with have their hands into and how they are running their business. Are you finding that to be true? Is that a push for the B Corp kind of momentum?
Big time. And I'm an upper cusp millennial. I found a cool way to say I'm old. But I'm 39, so I think I'm depending on what statistic you use, it starts in like 81. Right. I was born in 83. I think our generation was definitely, the millennials were the first ones where we're like, man, this is kind of effed up. Like, what are we doing here? And, and then I was, just starting a career and moving up and doing well when, the Great Recession happened. And I graduated in 04 when it was kind of down. And then it's like, oh, boom, boom, boom. And then it's like the ladder gets pulled out from underneath you. And I think, though, that we still kind of had our parents' advice of like, you keep your head down and you work hard and great things will happen to you. And we were like afraid to rock the boat. And then Gen Z has shown up and they're just like, burn it to the ground. Just they don't care. They'll leave. They'll quit. They'll find somebody. And honestly, it's become it's encouraged millennials, I think, to find our voices, because now we're the guy like during the fight, like, yeah, that's right. Hold me back. Hold me. Like all of a sudden we're joining in this fight with them now that they've kind of helped us find our voice. And I think that they created enough momentum, enough room for conversation that I think we were no longer afraid, where we realized we're not going to be ostracized for speaking up now because, here's this whole demographic. I mean, the oldest Gen Z turns 27 this year. So I honestly think what is really happening is, and I wrote a piece about this, got published on Medium, about Milton Friedman was right. And that like, he was like, it's customers and employees will end this whole social enterprise thing. Will end that like businesses exist for more than making money. And I'm like, he was right. It was employees and it was customers. He was just wrong in which direction that they would go. And this new generation it's literally just a supply and demand shift. There's no demand to work at crappy workplaces, and the supply of talent, if you need them, they're over here looking for purpose in work. They're looking for companies that have purpose. They're looking for companies that do what they say they're going to do, that are ethical, that are values driven, mission driven. And even for us, like we do Salesforce consulting, it's nothing, we're not saving the world, but we've incorporated all this into how we do business, into what we prioritize, how we're involved in the community. And so it's become a recruiting tool for us. So I think that's the biggest thing, is it literally is capitalism. It's supply and demand curve shifting thanks to Gen Z.
Yeah. And I agree with what you said too, right? Like a lot of times the things that we do in our businesses don't seem super purpose-driven, if you will. You talk about being in Salesforce. I have a few different businesses. I have a transactional email SaaS. I have a form building product solution. I own a coffee roaster and coffee shop. Like I have a lot of different businesses, and any one of them, you look at them and you're like, well, what's the purpose? What's the purpose behind that? But there is this level of purpose in how we do business, not just purpose in the business. So, with our coffee, most of our coffee bean is direct trade. We go direct through farmers to make sure that we are doing good by the farmers and cutting out as many of the middlemen as possible so that they can get the most for their bean. All the things that we do a lot of local charities and Giving Tuesdays. And we do multiple of these events where our proceeds go to different organizations in our town to kind of help. So we do things, but it's about the purpose behind the work that we do more than we make coffee, or we build forms or we sell software. And so I think that's definitely true. My question is, and this is the most common B Corp I've heard of, especially being in the tech space, is this idea of like being, having a negative, energy footprint. And so that's their they're giving back to the community. That's their focus. It's their accountability. What other ways, what kinds of businesses can become B Corps, and how do they focus around finding out, like, what would you say is your encouragement to finding their cause, and what kind of causes can they choose from if they're trying to decide maybe a B Corp is something for them?
So first part of that question, any for-profit business can certify. And it's really interesting. I'm like trying to think through Be Local Georgia right now, where I'm literally rocking the Creature Comforts. There are B Corp brewery here in Athens. We've got them. We've got, let's see, 2 coffee roasters. Or 3, 2. Let's see. We've got a company that is essentially a software and logistics solution for food waste that pairs up with, Hartsfield Jackson and the convention center, and then organizations that need food, and they're brokering everything happening so food doesn't get wasted and people get to eat. And then we have, like an insurance broker. We have a Salesforce consulting shop. We have all these, like, this random mix of, and not everybody is a social enterprise. And it's funny too, because even now social enterprise is a relatively new term, where I think most people, I was listening to a podcast that I ended up being on, and I'm friends with the host, but he had the CEO of this company called Inclusive they basically facilitate small group conversations, just about breaking down barriers, and you can join and you can sit in on conversations. But he thought that she was running a nonprofit, and it was one of those where, and it wasn't like, I don't get offended by that, because I think a lot of people have that misconception. If you're doing good in the world, you run a nonprofit, right? And it's kind of cool to see these companies come in, and for them, obviously, finding their cause, for gooder, it's, ending hunger. It's figuring out that it's not a resource problem. It's a logistics problem. It's an operational problem to solve in society. So for them, I think it's really easy. For us, I just presented on Friday. I gave a talk about marketing your mission. And one of the things I talk about is, like, does it align with what you do? Like, what do you do? Like, answer that question first. But, for us, we're in the tech space. So we want to get involved with charities that reinforce our brand. So how can we get involved in the technology space? And then we, have looked around, and it's very important to us. Like, when we started this process, we were 74% white guy, which in IT, you kind of go, well, it is what it is. We're in IT. And so for us, then it's morphed into where can we get involved in upstream solutions? How can we empower women to pursue careers in not just Salesforce, but in STEM? And then it went further of, like, when I finally did some digging into the actual ecosystem of Salesforce and all the consulting partners and it's like 3% Black. 3. Like, so we're sitting here, and sometimes you're catching flack internally from employees, like, hey, we're not very diverse, and I'd love to see about, and you're like, look at the ecosystem. So, like, I don't necessarily focus on our annual impact report and, like, how diverse are we right now. I'm more concerned with that will come with being there and showing up intentionally, consistently. That will come. But for us, it's like, what organizations are out there working to diversify the ecosystem upstream, college students, middle school, high school, girls of color, like who are these organizations, and how can we empower and uplift them? And those are the organizations that we've chosen to get behind, because we think that's the biggest impact we can have in our space. And obviously we still have, like, the CEO pet project, like the Georgia English Bulldog Rescue, and they have a Get Comfortable. Creature Comforts has their own charitable fund that we support. And so, we still have some that maybe don't necessarily align with technology, but align with our values. But the majority of what we do is around technology, because thankfully I had a marketing professor during my MBA he's had some stuff in, like, Harvard Business Review specifically about this. So I was learning from the head preacher, I guess, of aligning the brand with your mission as well, of what change you're going to make. And I think it tells a really compelling story as you talk about your company as well. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents from wearing my those marketing degrees on the wall that I kind of use.
No, I like that. And I think for those listening, I think that's something to keep in mind when you look back at your business, and you think about, like, what is it ultimately that you do as a business. That's probably where you start. You look at that and you say, all right, what in the greater world does this touch? Like, what in the greater world does this impact? Now, it may be diversity, and you say, all right, in tech, we're not very diverse. We would like to be more diverse, but the industry isn't diverse. So the problem we want to solve is not just us being diverse. We solve it first by making the industry more diverse. How do we work on more of those upstream solutions? How do we make sure that we get more people of color and women into the space so that when the hiring time happens, their hiring pool is more diverse to choose from? Like, how do we solve those solutions? We thought about that too. I'm starting a new business now that I'm working on, that this podcast is hosted on the website, right? And our goal is to help small businesses become places people love to work by developing people first leaders. Well, one of the things that we want to solve, honestly, the bigger purpose is that most small businesses fail within the first few years of starting, and we want to change the percentage. We want to go right to the core of that, increase that number so that more small businesses can succeed. And we think we do that by developing people first leaders. So that's part of our mission. Now, we're not necessarily a B Corp, but maybe I'm being convinced in this conversation. It's definitely interesting. I love the idea of businesses being a force for good, but often this tends to take place being focused on customers or the world at large. How does a B Corp business also become a force for good for its internal teams and developing that? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there is something, and it's funny because some of these are so hard to quantify. Other than I played poker for a really long time and I trust my gut, but there is. I think there was an intrinsic value to getting that B Corp certification to our employees. I think they're a little more accustomed to holding us accountable, and I don't know if the credit, I think it originally has to go to our CEO and our two founders and our president, and that they've created a culture of trust. I will give myself a small pat on the back for being the one who's getting the survey. I'm doing a lot of like, hey, I'm going to put 30 minutes on your calendar. Just want to talk anonymously about what we're doing, how it's going, your experience as a remote employee. So, and then I think our employees have seen us act on a lot of those things. Like our survey last year kind of got blasted for the PTO policies too. It wasn't that it wasn't enough time, but it was like 2 weeks, and then I'm hitting 5 years this year. I would have gone to 5 weeks. And we switched to unlimited. Just more than anything, like, no, you still can't take the summer off to go find yourself in Europe, but you can, if you've used your 2 weeks for family trips and whatever, and it's the holidays and your in-laws are coming, you don't have to sit here if you have no work to do and pretend to be online. Like, just take the day off. And so that came up a lot in the survey, and it was like, okay, change that. And then, 2 years ago, it was, a lot of last minute decisions seemed to be made with little to no input. And people felt we were being transparent as far as telling people hey, we changed something. But it was coming from the managers of like, hey, when you roll out a new policy and I don't know about it, my team calls me. They don't call you. And then I feel stupid when I go, I don't know. That was the first time I'd heard about it. So now it's just like a biweekly call with the president, our president kind of oversees the delivery side of the consulting. And he's with all the team leads. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we're thinking about doing, and collecting feedback, getting, like, hey, that's going to blow up in our face. And sometimes they just don't see it because they're not in the weeds enough. So I think it really, for us, it's been building that culture of trust where employees feel empowered to speak up. We empower, like, if you see something that's broken and you want to jump in and help us fix it, let Nathan know, and I'll put time on your calendar. You're on the committee now, though. You're like, there's definitely I think that's a value that most people miss, is they let people complain, but then nobody does anything with the complaint. So we kind of tell people, hey, like, if you see something like our onboarding 4 years ago, somebody started at the end of day one, told me our onboarding's terrible, but she jumped in to help me. She was like, hey, let's get a little like subcommittee going and let's fix this. Let's figure out what needs. And now that's evolved now to the point where onboarding's 2 days. You meet all the different departments. There's every 30 days I send out a new hire survey, especially when we're hiring a lot. I'll send out a new hire. Hey, fill this out. It's anonymous. Just let us know. Like, this is how we improve, and it's fresh for them. So those types of things, I think, go a long way when they see you listening, they feel heard, and then they see you actually put things in. We can't do every idea. we're not going to be ruled by democracy, by votes. Okay, well, the company turned that one. Sometimes it's just, you might not understand why we're doing something, but can we act on as much of this feedback as possible? And if we can't, or we're doing something maybe that we think might be, can we explain the why? Because that's another Gen Z thing that I think, and millennials, that old, like, hey, jump, yes, sir, how high, is kind of gone now. I think you have to go, hey, here's the business decision we made. Here's why we're making it. After 2020, here's all the things we did. We didn't furlough, we didn't lay off, but hey, bonuses probably aren't going to be that much. We didn't make much money last year. If you would have rather been furloughed and not had a paycheck, we could pay out bigger bonuses. But, helping them kind of understand what went into that. Like, we're not Scrooge McDuck over here. 2020 was 2020. Like, here's a bonus. It's just not what you're accustomed to getting, but like, here are the facts behind why that happened. And then I think it goes over a little, okay, like they understand what they did. They understand the sacrifice a little bit more of, not, we didn't have any PE money, so we didn't have to make any money in 2020. We didn't have to guarantee returns to anybody. So anyway, I think those are the big things. It's just letting people be heard and acting on what you're actually hearing. And you do that long enough and consistently enough that it builds a lot of trust. So, because I've even emailed the boss sometimes and been like, hey man, do you feel bad about this? Like, about something that we're, like, hey, let's not, let's talk here. Let's think about this. Even little things. Like, one day he was like, I'm going to send this out on Sunday. I'm like, no, because they're going to hit their managers up. And now it's Sunday noise. Like, roll it out let everybody start their day, roll it out at 1 on Monday. Those types of little things.
Yeah, and there's a great deal of wisdom in that, and I share this a lot when I talk about feedback and doing surveys and trying to create a short feedback loop with the team. Is that not everybody needs to be right or their decision to be made, but they all have to feel like you actually listened, you considered it, you weighed it. And yes, you may have come up with a decision or stay stuck with the decision you had already made, but it wasn't because you didn't listen and you didn't care and you didn't weigh it. And you don't have to tell them, hey, we have absolutely implemented the thing that you said, but you do have to say, I heard you. And here's why we made the decision that we made. But your points are valid and we feel it. And unfortunately, this is where we're at today. Sometimes just being honest and giving clarity and communicating with your team and letting them know is so important. Feedback is such a tricky thing. You should be getting as much of it as you can and implementing as much of it as you can, but you can't implement it all, but you can communicate why you didn't implement it and hopefully do so in an honest and trustworthy way. I talked earlier in the episode about one of our core values of being people first. It drives all of the decisions that we make. We take care of our team, our customers, our stakeholders. Generally, in that order is the priority. For those who are perhaps not ready to flip the switch and become a full-fledged, full-on B Corp, but yet want to put people over profits, want to put purpose over profits. What are some recommendations or things you think your general everyday corporation is saying, listen, we want to be good. We want to do good, but I don't know that I'm ready to join an organization and jump through a bunch of hoops and go through this evaluation process, but I want to start somewhere. What's your recommendation of where they can start?
I honestly think that might be the thing that is the best about what, when people are like, oh, are there dues or their annual fees to be, I'm like, yes. And then, but it's like, well, what do you get for them? The B impact assessment. And it's a free tool, but they have this whole standards board. They have a standards team that kind of, and this is, I think we're on version 6 or 7 right now. So it's constantly, I mean, there's still things I might improve on it, but, for the most part, I can't think of a better tool to use that is free to start measuring, those things of like, I don't know, what are our employee demographics? What, have we set goals? What is our carbon footprint? Like those, going through that assessment and starting to think, especially for, when we were 8 employees when we started this process. So like, we didn't have a handbook, we didn't think about what does it look like when we hire a 24-year-old woman who's planning on starting a family soon, that we don't have a lactation break policy, let alone a handbook. But we don't have that. Like, of course, yeah, go. But some of those like codifying these things, I think are very valuable. First impressions when somebody starts, you kind of look through the handbook and you're like, what's the parental leave? I don't really know. Like as you start to think about like, what is my business going to look like? Some of those things are really easy lifts, but going through that and seeing like, oh, so this is kind of what would be the gold standard of a handbook. And this is like people do 40 hours of volunteer time every year. Like, could we do that? What does that look like? Maybe we can only do 2. And starting to break down like what other benefits are out there. How are we doing this? Where do we stack up? And then you never really, you could take it and never certify. You don't hit the submit button, but you can go through and it will show you all the questions. And as you answer questions, other questions kind of unlock if you're doing certain things. So I think that's the best advice I would give is, and don't be afraid when you take that look in the mirror. I always tell, because I teach a class at UGA, we work with clients. I have a consulting business. I'm like you. I have a consulting business on the side that I do B Corp consulting. And the first thing I have every client do or student project client do is take the assessment and let me know when you're done. Don't go down rabbit holes, but just take 2 to 3 hours on a Sunday, knock it out, and don't freak out when your score is a 40 because you need 80 to certify. Because people like get so down in the dumps. They're like, oh, we're such a terrible company. I'm like, you're probably not. But now I can get to work. So give me access and I can go do my thing and we'll help you. Because I think a lot of it too then is figuring out the strategy of like, how are we going to get more involved in the community? How are we going to, I've talked to companies where they're like, I just don't know how to recruit diverse talent. And I'm like, well, where are you recruiting? Well, the same places we've always recruited. Okay. Can we look somewhere different? But some people are so wired in the way they've always run their business that it's like, hadn't thought about doing something different and maybe getting different results. So it's like those types of things too, that I think as you go through it and you put the right people in charge of that project, even if you just wanted to tackle like a section, and just say, okay, let's just, we're a manufacturing firm. Let's just go through the environmental section. Or, hey, we do, we have an online marketplace. Maybe we should go through the customer section. Like, what are we using their data for? Where are we disclosing what we're doing with data and cookies? And, are we GDPR compliant? Like, could we do a little bit more and be a little more transparent? So I think just pick one and just start tackling it and just start knocking it out. In the process of certifying isn't exactly like a walk in the park. It usually takes a couple of years. It's like, especially the bigger the company, the bigger the ship that you're turning around in the middle of the ocean. So, and also my other advice is for smaller companies, if you're thinking about, hey, we want to scale this thing and we're going to need to recruit and we're going to need to do it early. You have to recertify every 3 years, but then you've got the framework in place. You're tracking all the KPIs. The recertification's a lot easier. But if you're planning on scaling, it gives you a great set of guardrails for corporate decision making. Because when you're scaling and you start taking on water and it's choppy, and anybody that's been through there knows it's like a lot of grease fires that you're putting out. And I think I always use the taking on water analogy because I think it's a lot of this stuff might be considered heavy. So like, what are you chucking over the side of the boat? But if you're committed and you're a B Corp and this is a part of your identity now, you're like, I need to find something else to chuck over the boat, over the side. I can't, this is us now. So I think for scaling a business with purpose and making sure that you retain that purpose and your original vision for your company, I think it's a very valuable tool. So, but yeah, you don't have to certify. You can take it, bimpactassessment.net.
I love that. I think that's, I would definitely, I'll definitely check it out myself, and I encourage others to do so, even for just to take the pulse. Where are you at today? You say you care about all of these things, just see where you're at. And it may be eye-opening and set, like you said, set the course for becoming a more purposeful and conscious capitalist business. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's a good thing. Nathan, I'll give you the last word. Is there anything that you would like to close with, or anywhere you would like to direct people, our listeners?
Yeah, I'll throw in one thing just to piggyback off your comment of also I'm also on a nonprofit board called B Academics, which were a bunch of people smarter than me with PhDs and things. I just was like, well, I teach and I run a B Local. I run B Local Georgia. So I'm like, so I nominated, or I submitted my own, an application to be the board chair or the committee chair for B Local engagement with B Academics. So essentially now I work a lot with the student engagement committee as well, where we're trying to really ramp up projects And especially me being in the Southeast, like, I mean, we're already in 3 schools in Georgia. I teach the class at UGA. We launched Kennesaw State this year. We have Emory Universities doing projects. Like, there is a growing academic footprint where if you do decide, hey, we kind of want to look at this and we want to take it, there's MBA program. There's some really smart students that are itching to get into this field, that want the experience, that want to work, that want to do something like this. So there are a lot of good free options for, even if it is just like, hey, our goal out of this semester is to work on one section, not B Corp certification. There's a lot of places that you can go and find some really good help that will help you navigate that and put together a strategy. And you're giving the students valuable experience, and you usually 99% of the time are getting valuable work out of them in exchange. So that would be my call to action. And then, yeah, for getting in touch with me, I might be a millennial, but I quit everything except LinkedIn. So, like, no, I don't need you, Facebook. We're done. LinkedIn.com/Nathan A. Stuck. And then, what else? LinkedIn.com. I think it's B Local Georgia. B Local GA is B Local, or just search B Local Georgia on LinkedIn. You'll find us. And yeah, and then advic.com is my day job. Profitablepurposeconsulting.com. That new website should be live by the end of the week. And I think that's it.
Awesome. Well, we will put all these links in the show notes for everyone. Nathan, thank you so much for being on the Leading to Fulfillment podcast.
James, thanks for having me, and always appreciate the soapbox to get to tell the story and hopefully encourage others to lead more intentionally.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Thanks to Nathan Stuck for joining me for a great conversation around B Corps and purposeful businesses. Everything that we mentioned, including the full transcript of the show, is available over on our website, and you can access it anytime by visiting leadingtofulfillment.com/009. Also, on that website, you can subscribe to our newsletter. There we'll let you know when new episodes drop, as well as send you original and curated content on leadership, managing teams, and finding fulfillment. You may have found B Corps as an intriguing way to show that your company means business about things well beyond your profit margins. And if that's the case, I want to encourage you to dig a little deeper into what that might look like for you. The important thing to remember is that whether you're a B Corp, a public benefit corporation, or merely a company that has found purpose beyond the bottom line, you can make a difference in your community and the world. And that will create a greater connection between the business and your team. In order for your team to truly achieve fulfillment in their careers, they have to believe that the work that they do matters. For some companies, that's easier than others. But if you as a leader truly believe that your business was meant for more than whatever service you provide or widget you produce, you can inject that into how you do business and not just why you do business. Thanks for listening, and I hope you join me on the next episode of Leading to Fulfillment.